Johns Hopkins accepts just 4 out of over 300 applicants into its plastic surgery residency. That's the top 1.3%, making it one of the most competitive and prestigious programs in the world. These are similar odds for college basketball players, the top 1.2%. It's easy to visualize what the top 1% athlete looks like, right? Because their skills are so easily admired. But for a top 1% learner, it's not that clear. So what do they have in common? What can we learn from them? We've studied some of the top students in our program who attend the top universities, and we've found that there are a lot of similarities in the way that they think and behave. And even if you don't want to become a top 1% student, you can still steal these strategies and become an academic weapon. It's a framework I call the mental athlete. Think about the top 1% of sports athletes, the best soccer players, the best basketball players in the world. They're not going through their day kind of guessing at what they should be doing. From the moment they wake up, they have an exact routine, an exact protocol to follow, and this routine has been refined and tested by the best coaches in the world. There's no room for overthinking, right? They just get it done. Well, I'm not a sports coach, but I am a learning coach, and I can say that there's not a whole lot of difference here. Sure, sports athletes get paid with their bodies, and we get paid with our brains. Their physical performance peaks in their 20s and 30s. Our mental performance is still rising in our 20s and 30s, which is why they make their income earlier in life and we make our income a little later in life. But it just keeps going. Other than those differences, we have a lot in common. The same way that sports athletes have proven routines, training, and systems to follow every day, mental athletes need to have those same systems locked in as well. So if you're planning a training day or a study day, and you have no idea what you're doing or why you're doing it, the best thing you can do right now is to build a mental athlete system. Stop wasting your time. Build a reliable system where it removes all the overthinking, it removes all the procrastination, and allows you to just learn. So what is the mental athlete system? Again, let's look to these sports athletes for comparison. They need to train cardio, right? They need conditioning. If you're gonna play a rigorous sport for 2 hours, then you're gonna need enough endurance to outlast your opponents. And if it goes overtime, then having great stamina is just the bare minimum of what you need. Now, for mental athletes, we need to train our focus stamina. I'll give you an extreme example here. The board's exam that I had to take for my medical license was a 10-hour exam. It's an all-day event. It's not an easy exam, but it requires you to be laser focused for 10 hours. That's not something you can just roll out of bed and kind of stroll in a test day and do, right? It takes conditioning. But now our attention span is dying. You can look at the data that big companies like Microsoft and Google have collected over the past decade, and you'll see that the human attention span has trended downwards. Most of us can't even focus for 1 hour study session without getting distracted. And the reason is because our training equipment, our phones, our laptops, things that we use to learn, those are the same devices that also provide us with entertainment and dopamine binging media. So how do we implement this and get better at focus stamina? Well, to track this part of the system, I recommend using a timer. Every single time you engage in deep work, start a timer and track how long you lasted before you got either tired or distracted. And then the next time, you slowly work your way up. The only way you can improve is if you measure it. Otherwise, how would you know? What gets measured gets improved. So having a system to increase focus stamina is a must. But what's more important is what top athletes do during that time. Which brings us to the next part, which is training their muscles. Building lean muscle to give them more strength and agility. The thing about building muscle is that having muscle makes it easier to build more muscle. So how exactly do athletes build muscle? Well, it's a cycle, right? They stress the muscle, and they relax, and they stress, and then relax, right? It's a cycle. And when you're stressing your muscle, you want to make sure that you're lifting heavy enough weights where it's actually challenging. In the gym world, this is known as time under tension. You don't want to just speed through your sets in 4 seconds, right? You want to get closer to 40 seconds. Well, actually, there's science to this that depending on if you're training for strength or hypertrophy, the guidelines are a little bit different. But my point is that if you're a mental athlete, even if you're 100% focused during your learning session, you're still not learning anything if you have no time under tension. But for us, this tension is called cognitive load. The mental athlete's muscle is our brain. We have to build our knowledge. And the thing about knowledge is that learning also becomes easier the more you learn. So it's no surprise that building muscle and building knowledge, or I guess strengthening neurons and neuronal connections in the brain, are similar to building muscle fibers. When you're studying, you want to make sure that it's challenging. You're using heavy enough weights. This is the cognitive load. You want your cognitive load to be not too easy, but also not too hard. You want it right in the sweet spot. If it's too easy, then you're probably learning in a very passive way. Maybe you're just passively watching a lecture or passively reading your notes. It's not challenging enough. But if it's too hard, then you want to break down the big concepts into smaller pieces. Or if you have too many concepts to deal with, then you want to chunk them together, chunk the similar ones together to reduce the cognitive load on your brain, right? So once you find that sweet spot, that mental strain, remember that feeling, because that's what learning feels like. So during your deep work sessions, again, you want to use a timer. You want to set the timer for about 25 minutes. And 25 minutes is a great place to start because some studies show that it's the average attention span of a student. But you want to spend the entire 25 minutes under optimal cognitive load. And then you can take a 5-minute break, right? These are your reps and then your rest in between. And then you go again, 25-5, and then you go again, 25-5. And over time, you start to push past the 25-minute interval. And I challenge you to try to get to 50 minutes with a 10-minute break. We're training our stamina and then we're training our muscles, but even when we combine these two components, they still don't make up the majority of the training. Think about it, athletes aren't spending the majority of their time on the treadmill or lifting weights, right? What are they doing? The third part of the training routine is the drills. When athletes practice, they run drills and they run plays with the rest of their team. They practice exactly how they will need to perform on the actual game day. And it's the same thing with us as mental athletes. We need to be going through the same motions and practice in exactly the same way that will be tested on the day of the exam. So if your exam is open book or open notes, then practice at home using open book and open notes, right? Get familiar with your resources. You want to know exactly where to find the information that you need. On the other hand, if your exam is closed, then you'll want to practice doing your problems and questions with closed notes and straight from memory. If you have to take a 3-hour exam, then you want to take a practice test at home and see if you can last 3 hours. And I can't stress this enough, this is the most important part of your training. Athletes spend most of their time in this drill and practice mode, and so should you. If you're spending most of your time reading notes or watching lectures or doing something passive and not enough time practicing, then that right there is the easiest way for you to start improving your results. If you want to level up your learning skills and you want to score higher, you want to save time in the process, and you like the style of how I explain learning techniques, then you're gonna love StudyQuest. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested. I'll leave you one last tip here that sets the top 1% athlete apart from the rest, and that is that they show up every day and they do the hard work even if they don't feel like it.